Imagine for a second, right, that you are carefully cultivating this massive, complex project.
Oh, like a sprawling spreadsheet for your company's quarterly financials or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe it's a novel you've been, meticulously outlining for years.
Right.
You might even just be visualizing a physical space you've completely optimized, like a perfectly organized garage workbench.
Oh, I love a clean workbench.
Right. Because you spent countless hours, literally hours, setting the parameters, understanding every single moving part, and making sure like every element is exactly where it's supposed to be.
You're in total control.
Total control. And then, right in the absolute middle of this carefully controlled environment, you find an unexpected, mysterious variable.
Oh, no.
Something you absolutely did not put there.
Yeah, the worst feeling.
Something you can't immediately identify. So what is your very first instinct? Do you panic?
I mean, usually, yeah.
Right. Do you immediately remove it to protect the integrity of all your hard work? Or do you take a step back, cross your arms, and simply watch what it does?
It is a profound test of human nature, really. I mean, our default setting is almost universally to eradicate the unknown, especially when it encroaches on a space we feel we've, mastered.
Yeah, because we crave order.
Exactly. We want to be the undisputed architects of our environments. And anomalies, they inherently threaten that sense of control. They introduce chaos into our order.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that tension, right, that exact moment of encountering an anomaly and deciding how to react, that is the beating heart of our deep dive today.
It really is.
So welcome to the show. We are exploring a fascinating and honestly beautifully brief journal entry published today, June 18th, 2026.
Brand new.
Fresh off the press. It's an entry titled Notes on Gardening, Part 929, The Mystery Weed in the King of Bitters Patch.
Part 929, that's dedication.
It's wild, right? And it was written by a gardener who simply goes by the name Ang. Our mission for you today is to explore how this simple, everyday observation about a quote-unquote mystery weed perfectly encapsulates the scientific method, the study of microclimates, and honestly, the profound discipline of patience.
Yeah, patience is the key word there.
Because reading Ang's entry feels exactly like finding a strange, unidentified file on a meticulously organized hard drive.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You're just scrolling through your perfectly nested folders, and suddenly, boom, there's a file named unknownasset.exe.
That is a terrifying scenario for anyone who manages complex systems. Your immediate assumption is just...
Malware.
Exactly, a security breach.
Your finger basically hovers right over the delete key. Your brain is screaming that it's a virus, some sort of corruption that is going to just take down everything.
You want to drag it to the trash bin immediately so it doesn't infect the system you spent years building?
Right. But then there's that tiny voice in your head that wonders, wait, what if this is a crucial system file I just don't recognize?
What if the computer generated this to solve a complex problem I didn't even know the hardware was having?
Yes. Do you delete it? Or do you leave it alone and observe how the system runs with it in place?
I love that framing, because to understand why that rogue file is so alarming, we first have to understand the hard drive it appeared on, right? We need to establish Ang's baseline.
We can't appreciate the anomaly until we understand the control group.
Precisely. So to understand why this mystery plant is such a big deal, we really have to look at what was originally growing in this pot.
Right. What is Ang actually trying to cultivate here?
So Ang has a primary subject in the garden, a plant called the King of Bitters.
Sounds intimidating.
It's scientifically known as Andrographis paniculata. And Ang notes that this specific plant was harvested, quote, many moons ago.
I love that phrase. That phrase, many moons ago, is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It really is.
It implies a deep historical relationship with this specific patch of earth, and this specific species of plant.
It's the difference between a tourist and a local. Ang is a local in this specific square foot of dirt.
Right.
And since that initial harvest many moons ago, the King of Bitters has been doing something incredibly interesting. It has been self-propagating.
Just doing its own thing.
Exactly. Ang notes it's surviving and spreading in numerous microclimates without any human intervention whatsoever. It's just popping up in different soil conditions entirely on its own.
Okay, wait. I'm going to stop you right there. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
If this plant was harvested ages ago,
right,
and now it's just self-propagating everywhere without any human help at all,
yeah,
is Ang really gardening here?
Oh, I see where you're going.
Or is Ang just like sitting on the porch, watching nature take over the yard? Because usually when we think of gardening, we think of active intervention.
Right, pulling weeds, watering.
Tilling, planting, yeah.
Calling this an experiment feels like I don't know, a generous rebrand for just letting your yard go wild. How is leaving a plant alone gathering data?
Well, it's a fair question, but it fundamentally misunderstands what a citizen scientist does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Aang is engaging in a highly advanced form of passive data collection.
Passive data collection. Okay.
Yes, the traditional idea of gardening is about enforcing human will upon the dirt, but Aang is stepping back and allowing the Andrographis to act as a biological sensor.
A biological sensor. Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that.
Right.
How does a plant act as a sensor?
Or think about how complex a garden space actually is. It's not just one uniform environment.
Right. It's not a sterile lab.
Exactly. It's composed of countless microclimates. The soil moisture, the ambient temperature, the wind currents, the light exposure.
All of that changes constantly. Yes. All of these factors can change drastically from one square foot to the next. Even within a single pot, the thermodynamics are super complicated. The side of a clay pot facing the afternoon sun is a completely different microclimate than the side sitting in the shadow of a fence.
Oh, because the sun heats the clay, evaporating the moisture on one side faster than the other.
Precisely. Now, Aang could go out there every day with expensive chemical kits, moisture probes, the thermometer.
Manually testing every single square inch?
Right, to map those differences. Or Aang can simply watch where the king of bitters thrives on its own and where it struggles.
Oh, wow.
When the plant grows vigorously on the left side of the yard but fails to root on the right, it is literally drawing a map of the moisture gradient and soil viability. The plant's survival is the ink on that map.
That makes a lot of sense. The inaction is actually a deliberate scientific strategy to map the terrain.
Yes?
So Aang has established a really reliable, self-sustaining control group. The king of bitters is the known variable, telling Aang what normal looks like in every corner of this environment.
And that baseline is incredibly robust. Just look at the title of the journal entry again. Notes on Gardening, Part 929.
Part 929, I mean, that is just...
It speaks to an almost unimaginable volume of observation. Aang has tracked this environment through hundreds of entries.
Right.
When you establish a baseline that rigorous, the garden essentially becomes a high-definition photograph to you. You know every contour. So if even a single pixel is out of place...
You're going to notice it immediately.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what happens next. Because right in the middle of this perfectly understood baseline, in the very same pot as the Andrographis,
a mysterious variable appears.
a new plant.
The pixel out of place.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Aang writes that at first, they thought this new sprout was just another self-propagated king of bitters.
Which is totally understandable.
Honestly, who could blame them? If you have a plant known to self-propagate everywhere and a new green shoot pops up in the exact same pot alongside it, your brain naturally goes, oh, there's another one.
Right, it's a visual trick.
But Aang looks closer. And despite being very similar in appearance, Aang realizes it is, quote, clearly something else entirely.
That split second of realization is monumental. What's fascinating here is that the human brain is actually incredibly lazy when it comes to visual processing.
We just want to take shortcuts.
Exactly. Ambiguity burns caloric energy, and from an evolutionary standpoint, our brains want to conserve energy whenever possible. We rely heavily on heuristics and pattern recognition.
So if something is green, has leaves, and is growing next to a plant we already know,
our brain just slaps the King of Bitters label on it and tells us to move on.
it's the cognitive equivalent of autocorrect.
Ah, I love that.
Your brain just fills in the word it expects to see so you don't have to think about it.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. We group similar-looking things together to save processing power.
Sure.
The mimicry of this new plant almost worked.
Almost.
But because Aang has spent 929 journal entries observing, the meticulous observer overrides the lazy pattern recognition software. Aang spots the subtle deviations. The imposter is caught because the observer is simply too experienced to be fooled.
But even with all that unparalleled experience, Aang is still totally stumped. They write, quote, compared to what I have seen in the wild, it looks like one of those common roadside weeds, but despite my many attempts, I still cannot identify it correctly. Now, I have to challenge this whole scenario again.
Let's hear it.
Aang literally categorizes it visually as a common roadside weed. If you are running an intricate experiment on microclimates with your prize king of bitters, and an unidentifiable weed pops up right in your control group, why obsess over it?
Right.
Why spend time making many attempts to cross-reference and identify it? Why not just rip it out by the roots to protect the data?
Because treating it as a threat is an emotional reaction, not a scientific one. What is a weed, really?
A nuisance.
We use the term as if it were a strict biological category, but it's not. A weed is entirely a human construct.
Okay, wow.
It's simply a plant growing in a location where a human being didn't plan for it to grow. It's a plant out of place, judged entirely by our manufactured desires.
Right, so like a rose bush sprouting in the middle of a commercial wheat field is technically a weed because the farmer only wants to harvest wheat.
Exactly. And this is where we have to look at the difference between curating a museum and studying an ecosystem. A museum curator's job is preservation. A museum is a static, dead environment.
Nothing changes.
If dust settles on an exhibit or a spider builds a web in the corner, the curator removes it immediately to maintain the perfect, unchanging display.
Because the goal is to keep things exactly as they were in the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
But an ecosystem is a dynamic, living laboratory where the entire point is adaptation. If you treat a garden like a museum, you pull the weed because it ruins the display.
Right.
But a scientist studies the dust to see what is in the air. Aang is choosing to study the dust. The assumption most people make is, this is common, therefore it has no value, therefore it is a threat. Aang refuses to make that assumption.
That is a staggering level of cognitive discipline. I mean, when I see something that looks like a weed, my instinct is immediate removal.
Yeah, grab the trowel.
The word weed carries so much heavy negative baggage.
Yeah.
It implies parasitism. It implies ugliness. It implies an unwanted competitor stealing water and nutrients.
And Aang acknowledges that visual bias. Aang openly admits it, quote, looks like one of those common roadside weeds. The genius is in refusing to let that visual bias dictate the action.
Yeah.
Just because something looks common doesn't mean it's irrelevant to the microclimate study. Think about what this plan has actually achieved. It has perfectly mimicked the conditions required for the King of Bitters.
It survived the gauntlet.
It has successfully established itself in the exact same soil profile. That makes it incredibly relevant. It is a brand new variable generating brand new data.
And Aang has actively tried to figure it out. The journal notes, despite my many attempts, I still cannot identify it correctly. You can really feel the friction there.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a passing glance. Aang is putting in the work, thinking about what's been seen in the wild, cross-referencing, and coming up completely empty.
Which forces a critical decision, a moment of truth for any observer.
Yes. Faced with an unknown, unidentifiable variable that looks like a common weed growing directly inside the control group, Aang makes a choice. And that choice is deliberate inaction. Aang writes, let's wait until the mystery plant grow even taller and larger. Perhaps we can identify it more accurately and correctly.
The scientific method of waiting.
So what does this all mean for the rest of us? Let's pull this framework out of the garden and look at how it applies to complex systems in general.
Yeah, let's broaden it.
There's a fascinating cognitive framework here for anyone who manages anything complicated, whether that's a software stack, a team at work, or long-term strategic planning. You encounter a variable you don't understand.
Right.
A strange data point in your quarterly report, a new weird dynamic between two employees, a sudden shift in the market. The overwhelming pressure in our modern world is to act immediately.
Fix it now.
To label it, to categorize it, and to eliminate the ambiguity.
Because ambiguity is uncomfortable. This raises an important question. How comfortable are we with ambiguity? We want to close the open loop as fast as possible to relieve the cognitive tension.
But sometimes, rushing to label or quote-unquote fix an unknown variable deprives you of the very context you need to actually understand it. Think back to our hard drive analogy.
Right, the unknown asset file.
If you delete unknownasset.exe the second it appears, you never find out what it was designed to do. Aang knows that a seedling is essentially incomplete data. You can't run a full analysis on a file that has only downloaded 10%.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. The identifying characteristics of this plant, like the leaf structures or the flowers, they simply don't exist yet. They are locked in the plant's genetic code, waiting to be expressed at maturity.
Right, they just haven't rendered yet.
Trying to force an identification on a sprout is a fool's errand. It will only lead to a false conclusion based on incomplete data. Waiting is literally the only way to let the data finish downloading.
Aang's patience isn't laziness or indecision. It is a highly calculated choice to gather more data. It's an acknowledgement that the current data set is incomplete, and the only mechanism to acquire the rest of the data is the passage of time.
Which brings up that critical point about our own tolerance for the unknown. How comfortable are we with just sitting with it? The pressure to intervene is immense.
Huge.
It takes a profound surrender of ego to look at a system you have meticulously tracked for 929 journal entries, see an anomaly and say, I admit that I do not know what this is, so I will wait.
It is so much easier to just pull it out by the roots and pretend your perfect, pristine baseline was never disturbed.
But doing so destroys the opportunity for discovery. By letting the mystery plant grow taller and larger, Ang is intentionally inviting complexity into the study.
And doing it in a very specific, controlled way. It's not that Ang is abandoning the garden to the wilderness. Ang is monitoring this specific pot, watching this specific interaction. It's focused, active waiting. You aren't forgetting about the anomaly. You are closely monitoring its development without interfering in its trajectory.
You're watching the download bar progress, refusing to hit cancel, even though you don't yet know what the file contains. It's observation over assumption, patience over panic.
It's a phenomenal framework for interacting with the world.
Mm-hmm.
We dismiss so many things
Yeah.
because they don't immediately present themselves as valuable. We think, oh, this is just a distraction. This is just a roadside weed.
Yeah.
But if we apply Ang's discipline, if we decide to just let the mystery grow a little taller, a little larger, before we make our final judgment, we open ourselves up to incredible insights.
Because the things we initially perceive as threats or nuisances often carry the most valuable information about our environments.
Which leaves us with one incredibly fascinating thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. Let's look at the raw facts of Ang's garden one last time. This mystery plant, this unknown intruder, has somehow managed to successfully root and grow in the exact same microclimate and the exact same soil conditions, perfectly suited for the king of bitters.
In the exact same pot.
It's sharing a pot. It's sharing resources. Our initial deeply ingrained bias is to view it as a competitor, a weed stealing nutrients from the primary subject.
That is the standard narrative of the weed. It's an invader taking what doesn't belong to it.
But what if? Well, what if by waiting for it to grow, Ang discovers that this, quote, common roadside weed is not a competitor at all?
Oh, wow.
What if it's a natural companion plant that the environment naturally introduced to balance that specific microclimate?
That would be amazing.
Right. Maybe it fixes a certain type of nutrient in the soil that the Andrographis desperately needs. Maybe its mature root system will help regulate the soil moisture in that specific clay pot during the harsh afternoon sun.
Yeah, nature's own balancing act.
Exactly. What if the imposter, the mysterious unknown variable that looked like a common threat, actually turns out to be a vital ally?
That is the ultimate reward of sitting with ambiguity, isn't it? Discovering that the anomaly you almost destroyed was actually the missing piece of the puzzle the system needed all along.
It really is. And we won't know until it grows. So, as you go through your week, try to embrace your curiosity. When you find an unknown asset on your hard drive or a weed in your meticulously planned project, try not to panic.
Just give it a minute.
Yeah. Let your own mysteries grow a little longer and let the data finish downloading before you pull them out by the roots. You never know what they might turn into. Thanks for taking this deep talk with us. Catch you next time.